Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the meeting of the Teaching and Learning Committee. We of the ability for public comment. So today's schedule is a little different, and I will say up front to presenters, it's a pretty tight schedule, so we'd like to make the presentations as concise as we can, so we'll have enough time for some of the conversation. And we also do have a public comment section at the end. We're going to try the same schedule again for our June 5th. Is that right? First, I get the right date. I'm sorry, and I'm wasting time trying to. June 5th meeting at 3:30, and then we'll do a little evaluation and see how things go. We also have a meeting, and I'll do this end now, June 26th, but it'll be back at our regularly scheduled time, and that's a meeting to begin to get ready for the next school year. So the agenda today is pretty packed. We're going to be looking at the beginning discussion around the curriculum around language arts, and I just lost everything. Okay.
Language arts, operator renewal.
And then, okay, operator renewals. You read it for me.
Okay.
How's that?
Sure. No problem. After the language arts curriculum, the operator renewal process, mid-year performance data, and a quick on career and technology education, and before procurement, and then public comment. And do we have people signed up for public comment? I was just.
Did you all start It's one person. Okay, we have one person.
We have one more.
Okay.
Great.
Okay. So, without further ado, let's get started with the update on English language arts curriculum. Sorry.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. As you all know, we started this process around our curriculum audit and the review in December of 2017. And 6 months later, the review team is here to share our top 2 recommendations to the Teaching and Learning Committee. I don't want to get into specifics right now. I'm going to save that for Janice and the team. But I do want to acknowledge that the team is making a recommendation to adopt a K-5 ELA curriculum for next school year. There is some flexibility, though, based on community engagement with community, parents, teachers, leaders, that if one of the options, which is a K-8 option, if people really fall in love with that, there is flexibility to amend that recommendation to a K-8 instead of a K-5. So I just wanted to put that out first and be very transparent with that. Throughout this process, this 6-month process, we've been guided by 3 goals. The first goal is to identify an ELA curriculum that will provide teachers with high-quality materials and resources and students with access to a rigorous, standards-aligned, culturally relevant curriculum. With regards to the culturally relevant curriculum, my office, Teaching and Learning, we are committed to ensure that our students, through this adoption of this new curriculum, are able to see themselves, and that they are also able to see and learn about other cultures and how they interact with one another. We want to acknowledge that this is going to be an ongoing process, and that is why we have also already reached out to experts in the field, such as Lisa Delpit and Lisa Hansel, and we've already started working with organizations and individuals around the city of Baltimore to acknowledge and appreciate the rich history here in the city of Baltimore. The second goal is to engage community, parents, teachers, and leaders in a robust way that will help inform the final recommendation to our CEO as well as the full Board of Commissioners. And our final goal is to make sure that we identify a team of teachers and leaders and central office staff to be able to vet any curriculums from vendors that responded to the RFP. But more importantly, we knew that we had to build the capacity in this team so that they could understand the components of a high quality curriculum that is rigorous, again, standards aligned. And then how would they be able to evaluate any curriculum that they were looking at against these components. Again, I want to acknowledge the review team and Janice Lane and our Executive Director of Teaching Learning for all the work that they've done. This has been one of the most thorough and thoughtful processes I've ever been a part of in my professional career. And the sacrifice and the hard work of the team, I just want to make sure that I personally acknowledge that again today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our Executive Director of Teaching and Learning, Janice Lane.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Janice Lane, Executive Director of Teaching and Learning. I'm going to let my two colleagues introduce themselves, and then we'll get started.
My name is Julie Carr. I teach 7th and 8th grade language arts at Armistead Gardens Elementary Middle School.
And I'm Mary Donnelly, Principal at John Verra Elementary Middle School.
So we had the great fortune of having these two members, as well as some of the folks behind us, as part of the review team that we'll talk about in the process today. And as Chief Conley identified, we'll talk through the structures of why new curriculum and the background behind that before we actually get into the process of the review. As you know, we have been working for the past few years over a 3-year academic goal, which is a very rigorous expectation for all of our students to really critically analyze text, read complex text, be able to take a stance, be able to write to an argument or defend what their thinking is, and to really build ownership and conviction over their own work. So knowing that this was our goal, part of the review was also what are we doing with our current curriculum to meet those goals, and then where are gaps happening. So being able to reflect on ongoing data review that we've shared with you before, and not really seeing that needle move where we'd like to see it, really launched this opportunity for us to get into the work of the audit and the findings. So the purpose for today is really to give you an overview of the entire process. Also to really share with you the stakeholder feedback, that both the process that we did for that work as well as the feedback from stakeholders and the varied types of stakeholders that we had with us. Also to share some results from the curriculum audit with you, and then finally share our upcoming steps and our follow-up for the next level of engagement. This timeline here is really just to show you as a reference. We'll go through that in a few minutes, but as Chief Conley identified, we started this process in January when the actual audit process began. And we'll talk through these details as we move forward in the next slides, but it did help us launch a request for proposal around a comprehensive literacy curriculum so that we could begin that review. We'll talk in detail as the presentation goes on, but in March and April, we really spent time working with the team to investigate all of the materials and analyze them against a criteria that was identified both in the RFP, but also nationally for us to make some recommendations both to you and to the Chief Executive Officer. And then finally, what we'll be looking towards in the end is the ongoing work coming forward in May and August. Again, part 2 of the engagement that we'll be talking about, and also the teacher development piece. So thinking about now that a new curriculum will be in play, what does that mean for summer institutes, ongoing professional learning and such. You may remember we talked earlier about the opportunity to really go deeper into the curriculum audit, and we did that with some partners. The partners that were identified were Johns Hopkins University, Achievement Network, and TNTP. Those partners were identified for their expertise. They have very renowned work that has been done around standards analysis. And what we used them to do was actually inform us, not to make a decision on their own, but to inform us around the process of where the curriculum currently stands. So you'll see the next few bullets there really talk about the in-depth analysis they did around standards alignment. Was the curriculum aligned completely and coherently from K through 12? Really thinking about the depth and the rigor of the content within the curriculum. So again, we've talked earlier about content knowledge being really important, and not only being important, but really supporting vocabulary development, comprehension, fluency, and making sure that the knowledge demand that we were looking at was comprehensive and aligned K to 12. Also, they looked at our current assessment strategy, and they also did a survey of 600 of our teachers to get feedback around what are they seeing in classrooms and what's actually happening with the curriculum. So we'll be sharing some of those findings along with that information. The information came back in March and was shared with senior leadership here, and again today sharing with you and with the public. The audit did find some strengths within the current curriculum structure, so you can see some of the pieces here. Again, I'll just walk through high level. The strong anchor texts, so really pairing of nonfiction and fiction text, and the instructional shifts being supported by the standard. So really looking at 69% of our teachers found that the curriculum had those structures. They really identified it as the good bones to work from, so those structures being in place. Another component or tenet of the review was the cultural relevance of our materials. So again, you can see a finding that the K-5 text actually have quite a bit of information and alignment to identity development, as well as alignment to the upcoming work around the civil rights movement. And then finally, 36% of the text in 6 to 12 really talked about the African American exposure and experience within the history. You'll also see that from the teacher survey, teachers were really eager for continued professional development, especially aligned to high-quality instruction, so that not only did they feel like the professional development was important, but they wanted that professional development to impact what happens the next day in their classroom. So 3/4 of the teacher reported willingness to actually participate in that, and 1/4 saying they would definitely commit to signing up. As well as finding some strengths, there were also some holes. As you remember, the curriculum was created 7 years ago internally to really get us that bridge to Common Core, so that what they found across those grade spans, again, K to 12, was that there were weak assignments. There were actually opportunities where questions were really text dependent, but not specific to text, so not really driving students back into cite evidence and keep the comprehensive nature there. That the components within the writing, and we heard this loud from our teachers, that they did not prepare students for college and career, that students were just writing more to a task. Weak secondary sources, that the review actually called out that there were more opportunities to build that deep content knowledge that I talked about earlier with some secondary resources. And that actually that thematic organization, when we put things together in a theme versus building content or topic knowledge, can actually distract from the purpose. They also talked about the disorganized resources or lack of coherence. So if you would go into any grade level, you will find a million resources for that grade level, but actually being able to find them in a coherent way and having teachers pull them off to understand the cadence of the lessons is difficult. And then finally, they also flagged the inadequate support. So the piece around not always having additional recommendations or accommodations for our EL population, students with disabilities, or our gifted and advanced learners. They made some high-level recommendations based off of their findings and the work that they've done with other large urban districts. One was to articulate a vision for excellent ELA instruction, and as you know, this is work that has been done or has started around our blueprint implementation. So really thinking about the blueprint, not only defining literacy, but what does it mean for, what does it look like in a classroom? What does it look like for school leaders? What does it look like for families and communities? So really being able to define that in a digestible way that everyone can work towards that common goal. The second is this idea of transitioning to high-quality standards-aligned curriculum for K-8. As Chief Conley said, we are exploring right now our K-5 adoption, but the option of K-8 is on the table for review, and based on recommendations from the field, we'll make that as a final determination. Their recommendation was to use Ed Reports to inform our selection process. For the public and for folks that don't know, Ed Reports is a nonprofit organization that has really taken the lead in the field of reviewing curriculum, both ELA and math. And it is reviewed on 3 tenets, and it is reviewed by teachers. So they've done training over, a long period of time with teachers to review, and they're looking at 3 tenets of standards alignment, content knowledge and domain building, and then finally usability, so how it works in a district. So they recommended that, and then also recommended to craft and implement a plan for 9 to 12. So they found some findings in 9 to 12 that they could also, that we could, adapt our curriculum and make some of those secondary sources and shifts in that work. You'll see the next bullet talking about the adoption, really those features we just talked through. So really considering usability, cultural relevance, professional development, educative features, which really means within the curriculum, there's actual teaching that happens. So it will talk to teachers about if you're using this strategy for an EL student, why it's important in language development. So it really helps teachers understand not only the day-to-day, but the depth of how the curriculum was built. We also looked at supporting the continuum of all of our learners, the writing skills, and then building background knowledge. And then finally, another recommendation that we would follow would be that we want to invest deeply in professional development, because we understand that when we put materials in front of folks, they won't just answer a question, that they really need professional development around the build and the context of that work. So we did do a number of stakeholder engagement sessions and feedback sessions throughout February. We did 4 of those across the district. And what we wanted to do was really hold an open opportunity for folks to answer several open-ended questions. And those questions included information around what do they see as strengths? What do they want their students to be able to know and do? Unfortunately, we didn't have the greatest turnout at those sessions. We had approximately 65 folks across those 4 sessions. And what that triggered for us was another way to get to more teachers. So we instituted what we called feedback cafes during systemic professional development in February. And we actually had teachers come in and answer those same questions in a format of a 4 corners activity, where they could come in before the professional development or after the professional development to share their insights. We also had a few of our support staff, some of our academic content liaisons, or some of our additional folks actually do it directly with schools. That bolstered our feedback to about 220 teachers altogether, in addition to those 60 in the first iteration of the visits. We also had the opportunity to share our presentation with PCAB and bring the information to our advisory board there. We had a great turnout. There were about 35 folks in the room for that evening that actually engaged in that same 4 corners activity. They really were thankful for the opportunity to voice their own thoughts around the curriculum and what they wanted to see. And then again, another way that we collected feedback was our teacher survey as well as a school leader survey, just to get the feel of folks' ideas around what was happening in curriculum in the district. Some of the overall themes.
Janice,
Yes.
just quickly, how many teacher and leader surveys did we get back?
Casey, can you check on that for us? We'll check real quick and get that back to you. Sure. The overall feedback themes that we got from that varied stakeholder group was really clear around cultural and pedagogical relevance. Just as we talked about earlier, we know that cultural relevance also is around pedagogy and the teaching. So it's not just about the materials, but what is the actual pedagogical work or the work that teachers do every day to interact with the curriculum. Also, this opportunity for more frequent writing opportunities and the call for an explicit program that identifies grammar and mechanics, so not leaving grammar and mechanics out on their own. And then an additional bullet came around realistic pacing, so that especially from our teacher feedback, that they wanted everybody in the district to understand how the curriculum works and how the scope and sequence works, so that when someone would come into their room, you know, they like to use the language that they get dinged if they're off of the scope and sequence, but really trying to help people understand the cadence of the work that has to happen within the lessons. Continued feedback was the idea of what we talked about a few minutes ago, that we need differentiated activities and texts and supports with scaffolding to make sure that we can have all students access grade level materials. We know that part of the development of the high quality materials is this rigorous expectation for students, but then also providing scaffolds where appropriate. This next bullet was really an important piece, was this comprehensive literacy curriculum. If you've visited our current curriculum, you will know that we have different pieces from different vendors put together. So the cry from the field was really to have something as a comprehensive piece instead of having to go somewhere for word study, somewhere for reading, somewhere for writing, and then somewhere separate for assessment. So really trying to bring those pieces at least together in talking through the curriculum and identifying that. And then finally, finally, the idea, again, coming back to the thorough and frequent professional development that really would support not just teachers, but school leaders and district staff to work in one vision and one coherent statement towards the work. So we got a lot of feedback, which was super helpful in framing what were we looking for in the RFP. There were some considerations we knew right off the top around standards alignment and those pieces I identified, but then what was important to city schools, to parents, to communities, to teachers was the piece that we brought up here. So we were very fortunate to partner with Ed Reports in a very close and extensive way. We are working, I would say we have weekly calls right now with Ed Reports. And that the team, the curriculum team, I'll let them add some details. What we did with the curriculum team was a little different than what we've done, at least since I've been in city schools. Part of the outcome of this work that Chief Conley framed was we not only wanted to review curriculum, but we wanted informed folks reviewing curriculum. And so in the establishment of the RFP team, there were actually 9 folks, which the makeup of those folks was a diverse group. So it was diverse in the ethnicities of the group, diverse in the representation of the types of schools that we had represented, diverse in the sense of we had both central office and school-based folks working together, and really just trying to bring the best match of that work. In the development, we were able to work with some leading experts that you'll see in the bottom left box. We were able to do some webinars prior to ever talking about curriculum with the review team. They met with Nell Duke, who is known for research around literacy deep work. We studied the essentials that she's identified for literacy work in all classrooms. We met with David Libin and had a webinar with David, who is considered one of the leading experts around curriculum analysis right now. So he helped us frame the understanding of what does the analysis need to include and incorporate as we go through the review. And then we also had several calls that the team participated with Ed Reports so that they could understand the way Ed Reports does their analysis and the way that the analysis is organized and available to us as an ongoing tool as we did the evaluation. And then finally, we also had the weekly sessions that we pulled together to really look at all of those features. So before we actually started the RFP to do the actual review, this team had weekly sessions that we were gathering together to do webinars and ongoing learning as a team. And then we had our ongoing support with our leading experts that we've talked about before. As Chief Conley said, Lisa Delpit, Lisa Hansel, David Steiner, working with the folks that we've talked through, and then really keeping tight with Ed Reports. And I don't know if the 2 ladies here would like to add anything about that review process or team.
I think one of the helpful things was that we made notes based on the webinars and the work sessions so that we could go back and refer to the things that we had learned from Neil and David and Ed Report. So that was really helpful.
Okay, so if you take a look at the next slide really kind of condenses everything that we talked about, basically from the RFP, from the training, and from the team to think about, as we did the review, what were the considerations that we were building our rubric around and our ask around the evaluation. So you'll see some of those key features listed down the left side. So the usability, what is a transition from our current curriculum to our newly recommended curriculum? So how will teachers respond to that? How will that work for school leaders? What will that analysis and correlation look like? The piece around cultural relevance, again, thinking about the pedagogical work and the responsive teaching to match Baltimore students and the need there. Ongoing professional development, so what are the intentional shifts that will be required by the curriculum? So not only do we need to make sure that our teachers are ready and prepared for the new curriculum, but what is the foundational build of the curriculum so that teachers understand that as part of their ongoing work. The educative features that I talked about a little earlier are what are the embedded supports that the curriculum provides. So we all know that we would love to have expert coaches in every single school, but the curriculum can also provide some of those supports within its own structure. Again, highlighting the need for all learners, especially called out in the audit, was the need for our growing EL population. As you know, it is growing quite rapidly here in the city. So making sure we had supports there, as well as specialized supports for our students with disabilities or our students who were struggling with content. Finally, too, adding the writing skills. Again, where does that happen within the curriculum? Does it feel like it's an add-on piece, or is it actually part of the comprehensive curriculum and built within the task and analysis work there? And then finally, really important in this work was building the background knowledge. That content knowledge scope and sequence that happens from K all the way through 12, that are both in science and social studies input that we know does impact the literacy work that students are doing every single day. So happy to announce that after the review, the team did come to consensus and a unanimous vote of the top 2 curriculum choices. The 2 you will see here are both identified. Open Up Resources and Great Minds were the 2 top curriculum recommendations to take to senior leadership. You'll see that Open Up Resources is a K-5 curriculum. Great Minds actually goes K-8. So again, back to that earlier point, we have some flexibility within that. Open Up Resources, you may know from a former title under Expeditionary Learning, so that you can see there that it is a teacher-created, project-based curriculum where students are engaging in interdisciplinary ways. This curriculum is aligned to the NGSS standards and the C3 standards of social studies. You'll see down to the next 2 sections here that it really talks about in grades K-2. It is 2 hours of content-based literacy with an hour of additional phonics structured program built in. In grades 3 to 5, the 2 hours of content-based literacy are included, and then they actually have a component called ALL, or Additional Language and Literacy block, where students can then go in and do some of the differentiated learning and some lab opportunities that connect to the science work. Here, what their foundational understanding is that all students must be held to the same high expectations and given the supports they need to meet them. So that piece around the scaffolding. Essential to their curriculum is character development, and they do a lot of work around talking about students on a mission to do good work, to do high quality work, and to do work that's good for the soul and good for the world. So that is one recommendation that we're bringing forward. The second recommendation is Great Minds. You may recognize the Great Minds name from the Eureka Math program, so it's the partner to that. Their curriculum for ELA is known as Wit and Wisdom. Again, teacher-created, comprehensive, standards-aligned curriculum. It does align to our current 4-structure module, and it's centered on rigorous core text with supplemental text opportunities. The texts are structured to build knowledge and increase complexity from grades K through 8. Wit and Wisdom does, as I said, create that complex text piece. It also really focuses on the knowledge base and build from K through 8. And that they also have explicit callouts and connections to SEL, or student emotional learning, and really looking at the CASEL alignment. So they have a specific call out to the CASEL framework in their work. A unique feature to them is that they are actually focused on a visual arts representation throughout the curriculum, so that they use the arts as a place that students can engage with complexity, and doing close reading of work through the arts is something that is built around students' visual and cultural literacy. They also have the grammar and vocabulary structure coherent throughout grades K through 8. And what you'll see here is their phonics program is actually Foundations. They call out for the use of Foundations. So if we chose this curriculum, we would actually stay with the current phonics and phonemic awareness program that we use with Foundations. And finally, we have been looking to really try and engage folks in a different way. So Chief Conley and I had the pleasure of working with one of our sophomore students, Amani, from Western High School, who was absolutely phenomenal in actually pulling us together to talk about the work of this with Facebook Live. So we had a session that was about a 45-minute session where we talked through both really what we just reviewed here today, the why behind we're looking at curriculum, and also the process. And it gave the public, it gave teachers, anyone who wanted to see that opportunity, the opportunity to ask questions and get feedback from the communications team via us around what is happening in the work and moving forward. And I think this has been a really great opportunity in partnering with Ed Reports. One of the things that's been really impressive in working with them is they actually shared this with their entire staff with the Facebook Live because they thought it was a new way to engage community. So as Chief Conley said, this has been a really thorough process that they've been following to really document the work that we've been doing in city schools to share with other large urbans in this adoption process. So something that we're really proud of that the review team has completed. And so finally, in wrap up, the next steps, we also know that by making 2 recommendations, our curriculum review team was a panel of 9. I will say that I am so proud of them because we did keep this absolutely confidential, which is part of the procurement process. So there was lots of prodding and asking questions from friends, family, and anyone around that. But they were sworn to secrecy. So this seems like the one thing that we've been able to keep really tight around the recommendations. But knowing that moving forward, we want every person who can give us feedback to come give us feedback. So that includes our community, that includes parents, that includes partners, that includes teachers, that includes students. So that we are also creating what we would say is a menu of options for community engagement. You will see here that there are a few recommendations around dates and times. We have just finalized all the dates, so that will be coming out from communications, but I'll highlight just a couple here. The first 2 for community feedback are May the 3rd, which is Thursday evening from 5 to 7:30 at Fort Worthington Elementary. And the second is a Saturday from 9 to noon, and that will be at Carver Tech High School. So those 2 are solidified. We'll have those dates up. They will be communicated via Facebook, tweets, etc., and also updated on our community page that has the information. Those are opportunities where where anyone who attends will actually get to interact with the 2 vendors. They will see a presentation from both vendors and be able to provide feedback around that work. There are also some, I want to say back to that too, we were trying to be really responsive to the feedback we got from the first round, so that we heard from PCAB doing it at 4 o'clock wasn't really feasible for the community, so that's why we added Saturday and a later evening session. We also will be taking our teacher and school leader feedback at our next citywide meeting, which is this Thursday. Every principal in the district, every teacher, every coach that they bring with them will actually have that same opportunity to rotate through the 2 vendors and provide feedback. The next bullet you'll see there around additional teacher feedback sessions. I'm going to announce them. They're not posted there, but just so you know, May the 7th. Will be our first teacher-facing session. That will happen from 4 to 6. And I will say that we said 4 teachers because our teacher population said we want it right after school. So that's why the earlier time frame is there for them. So 4 to 6 p.m., they will have the same luxury of having both vendors present to them, rotate through and see both presentations, and then provide feedback. And then also what we're going to do for teachers is host an open resource material night where they can come here to central office on the 9th and the 10th from 3 to 6 p.m. and the materials will be open and available that they can, dig through, take a deeper look at specific to their grade level or understand and unpack that work. Again, all of the sessions are open for everyone, but what we will be doing is when we talk to the community and the family stakeholder groups, we'll be talking to them from that lens. When we talk to the teachers, we'll be going for a more teacher-focused session. And then finally, there will be one more engagement opportunity that will happen. We did get a lot of feedback from the Facebook Live session. I don't think Chief Conley and I expected it to get as many views as it has, but that we will also have an additional virtual opportunity where folks will be able to get some framing around, again, the why of what we're doing, and then actually be able to hear from both of the vendors, see a couple slides overview, and then be able to go into some links to actually see the resources and materials. And at that point, they'll be able to leave feedback as well digitally so that we'll be able to pull that together. So part of our goal in this is, as I said, really to get as many folks involved in the process that we can. So really trying to share broadly to make sure that we have full rooms, to make sure that folks have their voice represented. And then our job will be to take that feedback along with the recommendation from the review team and make sure that senior leadership here at central office has that information around the informed recommendation of both materials. And finally, we will be coming, as you see, May 1st, we're here together to share this with you, but we'll be coming back on May 22nd to the full board to make a recommendation of the top choice out of that work. So again, that recommendation, the review team has a recommendation out of the top two, and then the ongoing community feedback will inform that recommendation that will be shared. And then finally, our goal is for our formal recommendation to be approved by the Board of Commissioners, the full board, on June the 12th, so that we can then start that work of really preparing for the professional development for teachers, so that is the ongoing work that we've been focused on, is really starting to outline the structures and systems for teachers and for professional development. So those are all of the updates that I have for you, but if you have questions for us or the team in general.
Yeah, I'm going to open it up for questions. The first one I have, though, in looking at the date for the formal recommendation from the board, how is that going to impact any possible procurement around this recommendation? Because that's.
Do you want to hit anyone?
Well, a couple of things we're thinking about is, one, we're using next year's budget to purchase these materials, so we wouldn't have been able to purchase anyways till July 1. However, we're meeting with Chief Walker to try to secure a way to do this ordering. So if after the board votes on June the 12th, we were actually hoping, just to be on the safe side, to be able to put that order in immediately.
I would
And
just
to
add.
that,
Oops,
yeah.
I'm sorry,
Were
I
you
was
gonna
just
talk
going to
about
add to,
professional?
yes.
Go
So
ahead.
at the CIO's Institute, we'll also have samplers from the curriculum so that teachers and school leaders will be able to see that. Both of the resources that we've identified also have an open resource opportunity, so that once the choice is made, teachers will actually be able to go onto the website and see the systems and structures and lessons within that, so that we want to be really thoughtful around teacher planning in addition to when materials would arrive.
With the thinking that we emailed schools, I believe this past week, and that we would provide a summer learning opportunity around the ELA curriculum and provide opportunities, options, so you could choose either the last week in July or the first week in August to attend a summer institute around our curriculum.
Give you time, okay. So the board vote itself is going to include the procurement approval. I just want to make certain of it.
That's
Okay,
correct.
All right.
Yes.
Okay, so let's see, who,
I have
go ahead.
I have a series of questions, so I'll do one and then we'll just go. I guess the first is a content question. My worry, so I know a bit about ELL, but not so much about Great Minds and Wit and Wisdom, but our biggest challenge, one of our biggest challenges is many of our students are way behind where they need to be. So I believe in project-centered, learning, and a lot of the stuff that you outlined. But my worry is, can you explain to me how these curriculums address the real skill deficits our kids bring to the table and how we need to catch them up?
Absolutely. So I think one of the essential pieces in this review was the depth of understanding of the rigor built within the curriculum. So one of the things that we know is that often students have learning opportunities that are so scaffolded or over scaffolded that it actually breaks down their actual learning and the rigor that needs to happen for students to be on grade level. So important in both contexts of both curriculum that you see as recommendations is a rigorous exposure to complex text and learning throughout. Both programs do have embedded within them recommendations for students that are struggling or for students, as I said, with special needs or students that are ELs. But they also both have supplemental aspects to them where you can choose text that aligns to the content and the theme that actually spans across different lexile levels, or for the public, those levels that we know students are reading, so that there's opportunity within that. What's different around that is that it's not just any random topic. topic. It is a topic aligned to what the rest of the class is learning, but it allows teachers to be able to make some choices around what students need in addition to not only have that exposure to the complexity, but also to build up their own skill set to approach that work on their own and independently.
Okay,
Sure.
that,
Julie wants to add if
oh,
that's okay for
sure,
a
I
second.
had a follow-up, I'm just on that, but go ahead.
I would add that one of the things that I think is most exciting about both of these options is that they address the skill deficit in a long-term way. So what Janice was addressing is how teachers can work with students in the classroom moment to moment to meet the needs of the curriculum demands. But because this is a K-5 or K-8 program that builds from year to year and is a deeply embedded content-based program, it's almost eliminating over time that gap. So we'll have teachers who are not only engaging in material that they weren't necessarily engaging in meaningful ways or long-term ways, not only engaging in them, but students are getting it earlier. And so when our kindergartners are engaging in science and social studies content that they weren't getting in as meaningful ways earlier, then by the time they're up in our upper grades, those gaps are not as significant. So we have a short-term fix with the scaffolds that each of the programs addresses and provides, but then a long-term fix for kind of eliminating that gap.
And I would say that there's a cycle of that learning that happens throughout. So both programs have very clear instructional routines that happen across grade levels to also build for that gap as well.
I wanted to follow up on one point that you made, then I have other questions, but I'll turn it over. The idea that we over-scaffold, and we unintentionally water down things, because we over-scaffold, and then I'm not an expert in literacy, but I could see this happening, why we're not teaching at the right level, right? We don't teach at the rigorous level. So we have to expose our kids to rigorous texts and complex texts along the way, even if they are well behind, and then help them. But what's happening is we're overly scaffolding and we're teaching at too low of a level.
That's right. That's correct.
And then we
We're
stay
taking-
there.
That's right. And we're taking away their access and the equity to that complexity by thinking that students can't do it. So we've pulled it away from them to make them step by step versus building ownership. And it's actually interesting because what you'll find when you want to do some free time of reading, you'll see the alignment reports that were shared with us. You'll see the recommendations around that, and you'll actually see a specific call out around that with the text-dependent questions that are built in the current curriculum. That sometimes the questions actually distract kids so far from the text that you're breaking the purpose of the complexity of the work that they're doing.
You can almost answer it.
I actually did read those.
That's good. I'm glad.
I have other questions.
Commissioner
Okay,
Berkeley.
So I'm going back to the scaffolding. I just want to be clear. So are we saying, I'm looking at the differentiated activities, text, and examples of scaffolded supports. We need those because we have students who are behind. Is that right?
Because we have students that were
Who are behind?
who are behind. I think that you're always looking at scaffolding as an instructional routine to meet the needs of learners in your classroom, but it's also aligned to the complexity of the work that they're doing.
Okay, so I have a strong interest in as long as we've had students, for those that we have in kindergarten and keep working up, or even if they come later and they're behind, do these programs provide ways to, if you start in kindergarten, they shouldn't get behind, right? Because if these
That's
are
right.
effective, that shouldn't be a problem. And if they are behind, then are they effective at helping catch up? And so that's one question, and tied to it, if you, either here or in the future, I would love to know the research that supports these. And I hear the ideas, but have these methods or these materials been compared to other materials, and how do they compare in terms of being effective?
Sure, absolutely. I would say in your catch-up question, that really, again, thinking about the way that the build is coherent around the knowledge build, the vocabulary build, the content build that happens, that is the goal, that as students are in kindergarten and grow up, that we won't have as big of a gap. as we currently do. So really trying to think about that. And yes, within the curriculum, there are recommendations that if a student's struggling, what can you do next? Whether they're grouping recommendations or recommendations to work with specific students. And then again, some recommendations around supplemental opportunities within the materials to be able to identify those needs. And we can certainly pull the research base and share those with you. I don't have that here with me now. Sure.
I'd like to know who was on the review team, the RFP review team. I would like to know everyone that was on that team. I don't know if you have the answer now, or if we could be provided with that.
Sure. So I can tell you the makeup of the team was 9 members. So there were 5 school-based folks and 4 central office folks on that team. I cannot share the information of their names per procurement process.
So we can't know who they are, who they actually are. We cannot know who they are besides them being district-based, school-based. Just curious to know who they are.
So I can check with procurement around, I'm not sure if you're asking for names or if you're asking for profiles. I can tell
They
you
can be
grade levels
names,
and
they can be
schools.
profiles. I know that were these 2 ladies also on that team?
Mhm.
So in addition to these 2 ladies, I'm just curious to know who else
Sure.
was on the team to review this.
Absolutely.
Something else that and thank you for the work. This is really, it's nice. But I also, just some language, because literacy is definitely a part of English language arts learning, but I don't think that we should call it literacy, a literacy curriculum. I think this is a English language arts curriculum for K through 5, so I think we should be consistent in that language. Also, I'm looking at EL's, I'm looking at their programming, and I noticed that Southwest Baltimore Charter School in 2015 showed significant gains in ELA with the curriculum for 6 through 8. I also noticed that there is a 3 through 8 curriculum, and then there's a K through 5 curriculum. So it looks like the K through 5 curriculum is the one that is free of charge, and then we have to buy supplementary materials to align with that.
For K through 5 or
K
for?
through 5.
So both of the materials both of the recommendations have free resources
Just
with
for
them?
I'm talking about EL, just for that used to be expeditionary, I think.
Yes,
for that.
they're both curriculum are the same, that they have those free resources, and then you add additional resources and core text as well as supplementary text.
For 3 through 8 as well.
For EL, currently, the way it's packaged by their vendor, they only do K-5. It does not include 6-8 any longer. It's a different vendor that carries the programming.
I want that cleared up, if we could have it, because I'm looking, and there's also a K through 8 curriculum that they also have, EL, they also have one.
That's the first version. You're looking at the older version when it came straight from Engage as it was a K-8 curriculum. It is no longer packaged that way. It is now packaged by Open Up Resources, and it is K-5.
I'll show you what I'm looking at. It is 3 through 8. So there is one for K through 5 from the same company or program, and then there's one for 3 through 8 also. So I guess I'll look more into it, and then if I have questions,
Sure.
I'll, because if they are, I'm wondering why there is one for K through 5 and then one for 3 through 8. If I'm going to do more searching into it, but it's from the same company, and I'm looking at it, and this is from.
Are you looking at Expeditionary Learning or Open Up Resources? Because what our recommendation is Open Up Resources.
That partners with EL?
That partners with EL, but they have the comprehensive program through Open Up Resources. K-5 was their submission to us.
Okay. I'll
So we can look
at
at it for sure.
Thanks. I had another concern about the explicit language surrounding our English language learners. I see that there are options and program enhancements for them, but how are we explicitly targeting our English language learner population with the curriculum adoption whenever we adopt this?
Sure. So the professional development will be inclusive of all teachers, and we will be working very closely with the EL department here at central office to talk about the ongoing PD that they do with their teachers and how the curriculum sits at the center of that. So that will be work not only with our ELs, but also with our special educators to bring them together and concentrate together around the work. Back to your earlier question, we actually had, I can tell you a little bit about the demographics of that group. We did have 2 school leaders, 3 classroom teachers, our EL specialist here at central office, one of our specialized learning specialists, our secondary curriculum specialist in literacy, and then myself as the ED of teaching and learning.
Thanks. I wanted to ask something else. What other students besides the student that was a part of the interview, what other students have been engaged around, if appropriately so, what students have been engaged around the idea of new curriculum?
So we did not do a student-focused group, but that could be an option that we could try to add in and get information around getting to our students for this next, between now and the 22nd when we bring the recommendation forward.
Are there ways for students to engage with the curriculum as a pilot or maybe a sample? Is that an option for their feedback?
I'm not sure that it would be a pilot, but it could definitely be
Not a
that
pilot. I think that I'm saying, are there ways for students to engage with this curriculum and to see how they respond to it before we adopt it?
Sure. I think that's what, we could definitely try to get a student-facing group. I think we could go back to Amani and see if she could work with us to pull some students to do a review of that as well.
And she's a high school student at Western.
Correct.
And this is for elementary school students.
Yes, I would get her to help us get the process ready, but then actually open up. It's difficult to get kindergarten and 3rd grade students to come out unless they're with their families. So, we would try to build some of those opportunities in as the community feedback or go specifically to schools. Mary, I don't know if you have any insight.
I also think, these are 2 programs that in some form have been used in some of our schools already. So I think, there may be some feedback already
Sure.
from them in their earlier forms, not in this package, but because when you introduced them, both of them were ones that we were familiar with.
I think it's reasonable that we could have the students look at some of the materials and give feedback. I don't know whether you were asking for a model lesson of a teacher to just get their feedback, but I think if you want more comprehensive feedback, if students had the opportunity to look at some of the student materials, I think my students have opinions, and I have a very large ESOL population, and they're more than willing to give
Yeah, I'm just curious
opinions.
to see how they're responding to it. I think that's my biggest point. How are they responding? And if Commissioner Chinya says that these have been programs that have been used in schools already.
I think some components of both of these in earlier forms have been used. So, it may be interesting just to see, and they've been rather successful in other forms, but that's fine. We can also do what you're saying too.
Absolutely.
That's fine.
And then finally, I'm curious, do we have the capacity to write our own curriculum?
So that is currently where we are in the past 7 years that we have written our own curriculum. And one of the pieces around doing that is what you see in the holes of the curriculum in the audit process. So it is very difficult to have the expertise here of folks that are deep in the standards, devoted completely to curriculum writing, and looking at the foundational understandings of a K-12 alignment within that. So I would say we don't have the capacity, nor do we have the will to do that. Currently, I'll let Chief Academic Officer Conley respond to that as well. I think that what there are options for teachers to do, and what the review team has been talking about, is once the curriculum is identified, how can we bring teachers together to inform the pedagogical work and training for other teachers around that, where, again, we would bring those experts together. But when you look at the curricula, the 2 choices that have been brought to you that are basically teacher endorsed and teacher written, they've spent years in development around that work, and so currently we do not have the will to do that work.
And I would just echo what Janice has said, and this work is getting so deep and so challenging, and I think that part of the curriculum audit, what the piece of feedback around the piecemeal, and when I sat in on those sessions and looking at how we had teachers over the years creating, writing these tasks, and how, you can only do what is within your wheelhouse, what is in your expertise, and we found that things were staying at a very low level. So I don't know if that's really the best way to go at this point in time. I do think that there are opportunities to continue to engage teachers and build out various modules that continue, like as Janice said, looking at how do you deliver this? What are the pedagogical moves? How do you ensure that there's cultural relevance connected that's tied back to identity in Baltimore and things like that? But I don't know if you want to start from scratch and build a curriculum at this point.
Can I add to that? So I came to the very first session when I was invited by Janice to join this team and asked the same thing. Why aren't we making improvements to what we already have? And through this process, I was continually blown away by some of the quality resources that I was seeing, and especially in these two programs. And one of the things that I think is most exciting about choosing between these programs is that teachers are going to learn so much from teaching from either of these programs. And our capacity as educators will improve because of the educative features embedded and because of the quality resources. And that will lead to, as Chief Conley was just saying, developing more units and more options to go along with it. But I think that these programs are really exciting opportunities for that growth.
I know that this is time sensitive, our approval of this, but as a current practitioner, it makes me a bit nervous. If we were to approve this soon, and then we're taking this into schools, K through 5 or K through 8 in the fall, how much time will teachers actually have to grapple with the curriculum? So in the system, I'm currently piloting a curriculum right now, and the same type of process happened prior to me now piloting the program, in addition to a few other schools in different areas. And then, during the summertime, then we review, we are giving constant feedback before we roll it out to the entire system. It just makes me a bit nervous, the time frame of us approving, and then how much time teachers will have to actually, and I'm looking at the examples and the modules and the videos that can help support the teaching, but actually being in that process for the largest buy-in and the largest turnaround for our student for their growth, I think is something to consider.
I would like to respond to that, please. I think two things. One, based on what we've learned from our curriculum audit, what our teachers are telling us, what our principal supervisors are telling us, what our principals are telling us, I do believe there's an urgency with this. I do believe that we've acknowledged that we have major holes in our curriculum. We have major holes with our curriculum as it is aligned to the Maryland College and Career Readiness Standards. And I do believe there's an equity and access piece connected to this, and there's a level of urgency to ensure that our students, our teachers have these materials in hands to make sure our students have access to a high-quality, rigorous, standards-aligned curriculum. And I don't know what that looks like to wait another year when we have this knowledge and information of the glaring holes. The other piece to this, and we know this, and we are working with Chief Davis. We have a design team. We know we have to improve our professional learning for teachers. We know that we have to find more and other ways, better ways, to professionally develop our teachers around this curriculum. And that is something that we're working on the side right now, because that is the next step to ensure high quality professional learning, not for some of our teachers, all of our teachers, not 2, 3, 4 times a year, but every month. So I feel like that's coupled with this, like there is going to be anxiety, with a new curriculum in September, but it's up to us in our goal and our mission to ensure that we provide these opportunities to get teachers comfortable in a very quick turnaround.
Commissioner Cannon.
Thank you. I think it's a really good point, Commissioner McFadden, but from someone who's been, waiting, when we look at our NAEP scores, when we look at how I have the same sense of urgency that we actually have been creating things from scratch, and the holes that I've been hearing that we have, and so waiting another year is pretty hard for me. An ideal process could have been that possibly, but I think just to respond with my opinion is that that we have to adopt and train and support our teachers to actually deliver a high quality curriculum by the next year. It's really important that we realize that we have the holes. That's why we commissioned the audit, that we actually have said that we have to do an RFP. There's an organization, Ed Reports, that I'm really glad. I didn't know how much we've been consulting Ed Reports. They wake up every day and thinking about which curriculums are the most rigorous and standards aligned. I didn't know we were working that closely with them. So that's really important. But I just want us to talk a little bit about, because no matter how we do this, people are going to feel like we're springing it on them, and because the timeline is pretty short. To me, this is one of the biggest decisions we'll make as a board. The teaching of how we're teaching writing and reading to all of our students, K through 5, K through 8, and we're giving people 6 weeks to decide on 2 curriculums, and so just talk to me a little bit about, I guess there's 2 points to that. Talk a little bit about the RFP process, because I really pushed the audit because I wanted to, we did it again to make sure where are the holes, but then why did we have to go in to kind of basically, we basically did it in silence. I mean, you talked about it, that we couldn't talk to people about it. Well, just talk to me about the RFP process. How many people responded to the RFP? Can we talk about that? But then why did the team have to be, that we didn't kind of know that was going on? I mean, I just want the public to know that we were thoughtful about, and that's the procedure we had to follow. Just
Sure.
talk a little bit of why.
I'll give you what I know about the process, and I don't know if we have anybody else, but Laura Jones may be able to join us as well. That when you look at the RFP process, that is not a private process, so that is public. The RFP has been out there. Folks could review the RFP for the all-call of what we did. I cannot disclose how many vendors submitted within that process, but we had numerous materials that we reviewed as a team. Part of the confidentiality of that is so that the team is really identifying the high-quality materials and not influenced in any way by anyone else. It is a process that procurement has identified that you must be a city schools employee to be part of that process. And then inclusive of the process is the engagement around. So knowing that our goal was to identify based on the criteria that we went through earlier and based on a very rigorous review informed by experts like Ed Reports and such, and to create the recommendation from the team around that so that we could bring the top 2 recommendations to the public and actually engage folks beyond that work once those recommendations came forward. Again, I think sharing what you shared and what Chief Conley shared around urgency, I've been here for a long time in city schools. I think that we have an amazing teaching force, and I know that the work that we've been hearing from our teachers has been pervasively, they're ready for a change. They see holes in the curriculum. One of the things that came out of the survey document was countless hours that teachers are spending on different resources, pulling their own curriculum and trying to fill holes, so that sense of really having that happen. So we had some well-informed intentions in that work, so that, as I said, when we did the RFP, we released the RFP for the public to be able to submit those high-quality materials. And within that review, we also then did those engagement sessions that I talked about that happened in February and March. We used that information to actually inform our review process. So the folks that are on the review team, they actually went through what teachers were saying, what our school leaders were
So
saying.
I'm gonna jump in, Janice, because we're running out of time. I know, and I've got some other pieces. This is what it's going to be really important, because now it's May 1st. We're going to make a vote on June 12th. which is in 6 weeks. There are sessions as of this week that we're going to look at feedback sessions. And it's really super important to me, and I know other board members, that teachers get exposed to this material in authentic ways. You laid it all out, but the question I'm going to ask is how many people are there? And if 5 people are there that have looked at it, it's not going to be good enough. And so I'm going to ask the delay. I mean, we've got to get teachers to give input about which ones that they feel comfortable at it. I appreciate everything that's been done up into this point, but it's going to be super important. And I like what we've done, but like some of them are this week, and I don't know how they've been advertised. One of them's, not this Saturday, next Saturday. I don't know how we haven't done this well. I'm glad that this is going at the teacher at the professional development. But I just like really concrete ways that we can get good feedback that you can compile when you present to us is going to be super important. And at the end of the day, there are going to be people who are going to continue to criticize us that we didn't engage enough, and that's a decision that we'll have to have to mull through. Another piece that I'm looking at, I know Commissioner Cheney is looking at me sternly. One thing that cropped up from the teacher input was the cultural relevance piece. So I don't know how we feel good about that in these 2 curriculums, that they're culturally relevant. That came out from our teachers' input, that it's really important. It's a gap that we've seen. It says it's a strength, but then we've got to obviously, that's going to be the number one piece that we've heard from community members, that's very, very important to them. And I'm not clear about how this curriculum's addressing that. So we don't have to talk about that now, but it's something that I'm going to want to know specifically when you present from feedback sessions, how it's all coming together.
So I think you have some things that you could probably give us some responses to. My encouragement might be to, and although you have some dates listed for engagement, to maybe think of some additional ways of expanding that. I agree with everyone in terms of the importance of this and the urgency of this. This is one of the big pieces of in fact, it's the number one piece for me of the blueprint. And so if we don't start, and I do understand that the term literacy also, so if we don't start now, we're just having our children, having read through all of those grade levels and where you talked about the gaps and things, it's pretty striking. So I do think we need to be ready, but I want to be certain, as everyone else has said, that we have ample engagement from the public.
Absolutely, and we cannot agree more. Chief Conley and I have been talking about it since we started in February, and ways to engage. So I just put up on the slide, my email address is jlane02. If folks have ideas around ways they'd like to engage, please email, give us a response. We have tweeted, Facebook, done everything around those, but it's still not enough, and we've been hearing that ongoing throughout. And I'm willing to do whatever we need to do to have people get their hands on the materials and spend the time too. I would love to have every teacher in the district participate in this process. So however we can engage folks, if there are ideas in the public or teachers are out there listening, I would love to hear that and, plan that between now and June 12th.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We are going to move to do our update on the operator renewal process. And thank you to the team for your awesome job.
Do you want to ask people if they want to sign up, they can sign up?
As we are preparing, when we started the meeting, we had one person who had signed up for public comment. If there's someone else who would like to sign up, I'm going to ask, could they say, okay. If you would come over to this, I'm sorry, my brain has gone. Tanisha is here, and we can sign up some additional folks. We have space for 5, but if you will just come around at the side of the table, if you would like to, and then we're going to move ahead. Thanks.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Angela Alvarez. I'm the Executive Director of the Office of New Initiatives.
And good afternoon, everyone. I'm Teresa Jones, Chief Achievement and Accountability Officer.
So we are here to get your feedback on proposed changes to the operator renewal framework. It's something that we do on an annual basis. And so this isn't, I know there are new board members, so I just want to be clear, this isn't the form where we go over everything that's in renewal. We're looking at particular sections of renewal where we're proposing changes. In the appendices, there are descriptions of some of the other components of renewal. At a later date, we'll come back to the board with the full, this is what the process looks like once we get your input, as well as share input that we've heard from stakeholders. So I just wanted to be clear that we're not going to go over everything that's a component. This is about proposed changes. One thing I do want to say just about our overall process, we recognize the difficulty in the work. Running a school, operating a school, our work is very complex. And so the process that we've designed, not only is it iterative and reflective, but it considers both quantitative and qualitative data, trying to recognize the complexity of schools and the importance of getting it right when we're making decisions that have such a strong impact on the life of schools and families in our community. The current kind of framework structure that we've used was originally developed in 2012. It was developed with stakeholder feedback and had representation from across the sector, including operators, the advisory board, the Maryland Charter School Network. And as I said at the beginning, on an annual basis, we always go back, and what we're always trying to balance is making needed changes to the process, while also having predictability for schools that'll be going through renewal. And so those are the two things that we're always balancing. We had 13 schools that went through renewal this past year, and we have 8 that'll be up for renewal next year. We've conducted, so when we do this process, we engage stakeholders. We engage stakeholders through March and April. We've had a few meetings with operators. We've also taken written feedback from operators. We had a meeting with the advisory board, and now we're here to get your feedback on those proposed changes. These are schools, the 8 schools that are up next year for renewal. The renewal process is governed by board policy IHB and its accompanying regulation IHB-RA. In that policy, it requires that we look at 3 key areas: student achievement and academic success, which is worth 50% of the weight, school climate, and financial management and governance. Throughout the presentation, you'll see certain sections bolded. That's to indicate areas of change. We're going to talk a little bit more about highly effective instruction as we go through the presentation, so I'm not going to get into that here. But just for members of the public and people who are paying attention, in order to highlight where changes are, where it's not always obvious, we tried to bold that throughout the presentation. So the first section we're going to look at that has changes is academic success. Here's where we consider PARCC performance, college and career readiness for schools with high school grades, 4-year cohort grad rate, and then overall application and fidelity to charter. One thing that may come up is that certain measures are defined in board policy as belonging in certain sections. So some reasons why we consider certain things in certain places are based on that policy, just in case people had questions about that as we go through. For highly effective instruction, back in school year 14-15, we temporarily moved it. We indicated at that time and consistently reiterated that into the academic section. It was originally part of the climate section for renewal. Highly effective instruction comes from our site review. Later, we're going to talk about changes to that, so we'll get into more detail about that. But we moved it purposefully, temporarily into the academic section to be allowed to reduce the weight as we transition from using MSA scores to PARCC and getting enough PARCC data. So that was the reason why we did the move, is so that we could reduce those weights. And over time, we've been increasing the weight back as we get more and more park data. So we're now at the place where we have at least 4 years of park. And so it's time for the highly effective instruction measure to return back into the climate section of renewal.
As it relates to the academic measures, the first we want to talk about is the park absolute measure. And as we think about absolute as an indicator of proficiency. We look at proficiency in a number of different ways. As it relates to this particular measure, we're looking at the relative mean scale score of performance on the park assessment. We're also, for purposes of comparison, also providing additional information for context that would not be included in the calculations around the percentage of students that have actually met the threshold of being proficient. Currently, that's defined by park as levels 4 and 5. So again, that piece of information would be for context purposes only, but would not be captured into the actually calculated rating within this particular section. As we look at absolute performance, one of the challenges we've been looking to address over the last several years is the correlation between poverty and absolute performance. And so we continue to see that hold true, even as the park results have started to come out nationally. One of the ways that we've tried to address that is by looking at what we consider like schools by comparison, or when possible, we take a look at like students. So in this particular case, because of the district's transition to becoming a community eligibility provision district, we've had to make adjustments over time about how we actually report poverty when we think about how we classify our schools. So the key point that we wanted to bring attention to here is that this definition of poverty, or often referred to as economic disadvantage, now that we're using the ESSA language, means that we don't want to just necessarily just use the direct certification data because of some of the challenges that we've talked about before, and how we know that there are certain populations that are oftentimes undercounted and some that are undercounted for reasons that we're unclear about. We've elected to propose using a more inclusive poverty measure using all the relevant data points that we have available. So what does that mean? That means a definition of poverty or economic disadvantage that includes direct certification, but that also includes Medicaid enrollment, and also includes the use of the WIDA proficiency levels in a similar way to what we've elected to do for the Fair Student Funding model, now that we are assigning a poverty weight as a part of those allocation of funds. As a result of this, that means that there are different poverty rates, if you will, or economic disadvantage rates, and that means that the groupings that we actually put schools in to compare them are shifting because the numbers change in different ways for different schools. The other key point around absolute performance is that we also still provide the option to use the NWEA MAP data. And so we've also noted that on the slide, that that is still an option. And when they choose to do so, we actually take a look at the one-year growth using that data in lieu of the park measure. And that in that case, there's actually a virtual comparison group that allows, again, a similar idea conceptually of being able to compare the results of the individual school with other schools that have similar characteristics.
For a trend, there isn't a major change. The main thing we're just pointing out is that we now have 4 years. So to look at 17-18 in comparison to 14-15 results. For growth in park, we're going to continue to use the student growth percentile. So that's looking at the change in individual students' performance. So students who start at the same level compared to other students who start at a similar level, and then their growth from year to year over time. When available, if available, so the state has also started to use SGP. So if we have it in time, there's a question around timing, but if we have it in time, we'll include it in the data tables that schools receive, that you receive, the advisory board receives, for context purposes. So I just wanted to make sure that we were able to share that. For schools that elect to use NWEA, there's not trend because of the kind of data that it is, so it's split between those two measures instead of three. All right, so now we get to where we need input. So if we move the highly effective instruction, which is what we're proposing to do, back into climate, it means that we'll have to reshift the weights. I do want to surface that at least a member of the advisory board and a couple schools said they would love to keep highly effective instruction in the academic section. So I wanted to make sure that as we're going, we're sharing that feedback. So in terms of the options, when you look at this table, what you see is what the weights were last year, or earlier this year, this last round of renewal. Option 1 are what the weights were under MSA, so when we originally designed the rubric. And the reason you note that absolute and trend performance have the same weight where growth is worth more. And the rationale at that time around doing it that way was a desire to emphasize to schools the importance of growing our students. Our performance overall as a district is not where we need to be. And so we wanted to make sure that we were making a value statement about the importance of growth. And so that's why that had so much weight. Option 2 continues to have more weight on growth, but puts a little bit more weight on trend. So when you're looking at growth, we're looking at how schools are moving individual students. And when we're looking at trend, it's about how schools are moving, how school leaders are moving their entire school. And so the value statement there is that trend is also important. And then we look at how we're held accountable from the state and from other kinds of entities, there is a value to that, to ensuring that you're not just moving individual students, but that you're moving your school. And so that's kind of the rationale behind how those weights are. Option 3 would consider both trend and growth the same weight as being something that has more weight than absolute performance. And as you know, we talked about, absolute performance has that correlation with the relative wealth of schools. So it's important because we want to make sure our students are getting proficient. But the other two measures are sort of have more controls in place than absolute performance. Highly effective instruction, again, we talked about moving the climate, so we'll look at the weights when we get there. And then Fidelity Charter, we've not changed the weight to that at all during the process. In our conversations with stakeholder groups, we gotten feedback that schools preferred either option 1 and 2. With option 2, I'm getting more of a preference from schools. But we've also heard schools say, well, we would want to look at our data too. Like, people are very honest. They're very honest in that. But I think overall, we've heard more of a preference for 2 because of there's more of there's less of a differentiation there's more of a balance between the measures. They like the way it's divided.
I'm going to ask, before we move to the next portion of the academic success, and I know I'm really changing this agenda terribly. We had one person who signed up for public comment, and it was around the previous discussion, and she has a time element around having to leave. So if folks would be willing, I'm going to let her come up, and then we will continue our report.
Okay,
Will that work
sure.
for you? Thank you so much for being accommodating. Christina Duncan Evans. Don't go too far away.
Hi, first of all, thank you to everybody for your flexibility. I have a flight out to Chicago for a meeting of education people, and it came straight from school, so I really appreciate that you made this opportunity. You really didn't have to. So I've got a couple of questions about what I've heard this afternoon. One thing that is sticking in my mind is the quote that I wrote down: if they start this in kindergarten, they won't be behind. That's a really bold claim, I think, considering what we know about poverty being the driving impact on student achievement, not curriculum. And so with a claim like that, I think that I really would like to hear a little bit more about that presupposition. because I know that we're not doing things in isolation. I know that we are a system that looks at systemic solutions, but I'm really interested in how the literacy initiatives connect with other aspects of the work that we're doing to close these gaps in a holistic way. In our definitions of rigor, I heard a lot about high-level text. I didn't hear as much about critical thinking. I heard a lot about projects, but those can vary in quality. So I have some questions about critical thinking and what reviewers found when they reviewed the curriculum. I think when we engaged in feedback sessions in February, we approach this work as if it were going to be happening K to 12. My question is, what happens in middle school if we don't adopt the middle school curriculum, and what happens in high school next year? Are we keeping the high school curriculum the same next year? When members of BMOR met with Sean Conley earlier this year, he showed us schools that would be represented on the procurement process, and one of them was Carver. So I'm wondering if, as part of the profiles or information for people on that panel, we could see schools that are represented, because if one of those people is a high school person reviewing curriculum, I'm not sure how valuable that is. As someone who taught for 11 years in high school and now only teaches in elementary school and has my entire mind opened up this year about education and what I thought I knew. I'd also be interested in seeing race demographics, gender demographics, and how much training people have had on culturally responsive teaching. Santa Lisa's is on the board of Ed Reports, and so I have concerns about that being the primary external vetting. It just feels a little bit close for Ed Reports to be the main external thing that we're doing. I don't know. That's not my... 3 days is not enough for PD. Long-term planning is a must. We don't have the will to develop curriculum. Speak for yourself. I think teachers would like that opportunity. I think it would make us stronger teachers. I've been a curriculum writer, and I'm going to be honest with you, the curriculum writing that I did for the district back in my 3rd and 4th year, it wasn't really that good. But I could be managed, right, to do better, because I can do better. And so doing that would make us a stronger district. That's about half of my comments, but I will respect the time because you have given it to me.
All right, I'm talking with a red light. If you wanted to put anything else in writing, the remainder of your comments, and text them back, you can,
Sure.
send them back. We'll look to try to respond. We
I
have time
appreciate
during
that.
this, okay?
Thank you.
All righty. Have a safe flight.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate it.
And thank you, folks, for your patience and flexibility, too. And we'll now continue.
So I'm going to pause here to see what you guys think about the options.
He was ready.
So, just break it down for me again, because I think this is, I am in full support of highly effective instruction moving back to climate, and that we do have a space where we're looking at the performance, the academic achievement performance metric, because we've had to, we haven't been able to use that in the last few years. My question is, just break it down for me, Teresa, again, Dr. Jones, the growth measure, how we do that in individual students, because that's what I most want to be able, schools to be able to show. They meet students where they're at, and they are showing growth over time. I'm interested in trend and absolute, but it's really, to me, about growth. And so, but I'm not fully understanding, we match it based on demographics and what we would predict they would do. Or maybe just say one more word about that.
Sure. So again, for student growth, we're using the student growth percentiles, which are based on the scale score. So basically what it does is it'll take the first year's student scale score, it'll take all of the students that had that exact same scale score and look at how they did in year 2. And then we're taking a look then to say, okay, well then how is this individual student performing relative to that group? So it gives you a sense around whether or not students are basically showing growth at a similar rate to other students that started in the same exact scale score place in the prior year.
At the same school?
It's not about school. It's
all
across,
about, it's about across the district.
across the district.
So
And
let's
that's
just be clear, a third grader takes it.
That's correct. So
Right,
if you're
and we-
talking
and
third
then-
grade ELA,
Yep.
and there's a score of 722, we're taking all of those students with that same 722 score, and then taking a look at what is then their percentile rank performance, and then comparing that to what does that mean for the following year. So it allows us to take a look at their rate of growth from one year to the next. So if other students went up, so let's say, I'm making up the number, so those other students, instead of a 722 in the second year, let's say they went up to a 750. The question is, well, how many of these, did this individual student keep that same pace? Are they also at a 750? Did they outpace? Did they fall below that pace? So the calculations allow us to reflect the fact that students start in different places. So we like to think of it more of as a like student comparison versus like school, because this is looking at it at the individual level. The critical point here, which is also one of the things that Angela pointed out, is that the state also uses student growth percentiles. So they have data to take a look at all the students that were tested on PARCC across the state and how they performed. So one of the things that we wanted to be mindful of is the timing of our process, and the fact that in some cases, our demographic characteristics of our student population may differ slightly from what the state may have. So it's a reference point, but it allows us to get at the fact that individual student growth tells us a lot about what's going on, about student expectations, if you will.
So I've asked this question many times. For me, an easier way to wrap my head around, tell me why this doesn't work. Okay. That we look at a school and we see where every student is performing, and then we look at the PARCC five levels of scale, and we see which ones have moved. We see how they've moved levels. Like X amount of people were at 1, they went to 2. X amount went to 2, they went to 3, and we could look at growth that way, but we choose not to, and that's imperfect for probably a lot of different reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so maybe just offline, explain that to me, because I know to me, though, to give you feedback specifically on this, options 1 or 2 work for me. I think that makes sense because it's really emphasizing the growth piece, and that to me is the most important thing. Not work, how are schools moving students as a component of how we evaluate the school.
No. 1 or 2 work for you? Okay. Nope.
You're okay with 1 or 2? I mean, I think they also.
Yeah, they're asking us. They're asking.
Option 1 or 2. They want feedback.
It's been a long day. Yeah, and it's just May
It's already
1st.
starting.
It seems as though we have a consensus between that 1 or 2 would work for us. How's that work? Okay.
Okay, so we're going to have a similar conversation now, but we're going to take a look at our middle, high, and our high schools. So the key point here, first and foremost, is that for high school grades, number 1, we don't have the ability to actually measure growth. It's just not inherent in the characteristics of the assessments and that they're taking from one year to the next, because you don't have those consecutive years. So we have different data that tends to come into play. What that means now, though, is that for the middle high schools, we also want to make sure that we're capturing a broader spectrum of data. So what you'll see first in the rubric is you'll see for the middle high schools, you'll see for the 17-18 year, there was the 40% of points, which were just spread between the absolute and trend. What we're now recommending is that we also bring growth into the equation for those schools, because the middle school component for those schools would actually have a growth calculation that we would not have for the high school component. Does that make sense? Okay. So with that, again, we have 3 options for consideration. The first option applies equal weight to the absolute and trend with the highest rate on growth, using a similar rationale to what Angela had shared before, which was the approach that was taken when we had MSA data. Then taking a look at option 2, you'll see more weight towards trend versus absolute, and even greater weight towards growth. So again, growth having the highest percentage of weight across the 3 measures. And then for option 3, similar to what you just looked at in the prior slide, you'll see that there's an equal weight between the trend and the growth components. So I want to pause there to see if there are questions about the middle high component before we talk about high school.
And one more thing I just want to point out, with the high school, we have more data points than we do in the middle grade, so that's where you see a difference in the numbers. So this is the area where we consider college and career readiness, which is 20%, and the 4-year cohort grad rate. So that's why it's not exactly the same as what you saw on the prior slide.
Do you want me to? Can you please just share, you've gotten feedback? It's important for me that we've talked to people who are in this world and what they think is, so are you planning to or gotten feedback on these options?
Yeah, so we've done this whole presentation with each stakeholder group. Again, option 2 is the one where we've gotten the most, people prefer the most from the feedback that we've received, and we're continuing.
So at any time, like, when we, like, I don't know, the next time we have to kind of, like, we're going to eventually have to vote on this, right? Is that right? As a board?
Yeah, so we take your feedback and then we finalize it from there.
Right, so I guess for that, when you come back to that, if you could just compile like who you talked to and what feedback we gotten around the options, that's important.
Okay.
Thanks.
So now we'll speak to specifically the indicators that we include for the high school grades. As Angela mentioned, there's the college and career readiness component. A couple of things just to build on what we've done over the course of the last couple of years. The state has also come to this realization that college and career readiness needs to sort of have a bit of a more robust definition, and they've indicated certain data points that they look to include within that. We've sought to align our definition more closely to that over time. So what you'll notice here is that we do have a participation and a success component. So as you look at the participation component, which is weighted at 25%, you'll see there that there are a number of different college and career readiness activities that schools can get credit for. You'll then see for success that there's the expectation there that some type of objective standard has been met. And what you see listed here by bullets is what that means for each of the different types of data points that could be used to meet the requirement. So I do want to clarify that schools don't get double credit for having children fall into more than one category. So if a student meets one of these different indicators, they're included in the count. The key point that is highlighted here is that when it comes to giving credit for dual enrollment and looking at credit-bearing college coursework, that the state actually would allow for a D grade to be considered success. And we thought that it would be more appropriate to have a higher standard here and having a C being the grade that would count, knowing that that's what most colleges and universities are really looking for when they're thinking about taking those credits and applying those to a student's transcript. We also have 15% weight in this section that is comprised of college enrollment, and we use the National Student Clearinghouse data here to capture the data around where students are 16 months after graduation. So I'll pause there to see if there are questions about that.
And so the key change here is the setting the standard at C for dual enrollment. So everything else is consistent with what we've done previously.
Are our traditional schools measured the same way, their performance?
In terms of what's included in terms of the college and career readiness?
Yes.
Yes, in terms of what we actually report out on them, so we include indicators of college and career readiness on the school profiles around that. Keep in mind at this point, like as a district, we don't quote-unquote compare schools individually around all these different pieces. The closest thing to that is the school performance measure, which is a component that's specifically used for evaluations, and college and career readiness in the way that it's being defined here is a component within that. There are different methodologies around how the indicators are used there versus how we use it in the operator renewal process, but the types of data that we're looking at are consistent.
Thanks.
I guess my one question around your highlighted area, because I know this was a part of the debate around some things we did looking at athletics and what the rest of the states did versus what we were doing. And although I agree with a higher standard, to what extent does that put us at a sort of a disadvantage for our students? I mean, I know this is looking at the total program in terms of a review.
Yeah, so for operator renewal, so one of the tenets of operator renewal, and you'll see that in terms of what it takes to get effective, you see that reflected throughout the renewal, is, part of the reason why we partner with outside operators is part of our reform effort. We're partnering with outside people, we're giving them higher flexibility around resources with autonomy to help us improve outcomes for students. And so the bar for success has always been set higher because it's part of our effort to improve what's happening for students. And so we wanted college and career readiness the standard here to reflect what you would truly need to be transferable credit, to be really usable in that next part of the work for students. And I would say in our feedback sessions with the operators and advisory board, this made sense. We didn't get any pushback on this change. So next, we're going to go to the school climate section. So this section considers 3 areas that come from the school effectiveness review, which is our site visit. It's a 2.5-day site visit at schools. Parent, teacher, and student satisfaction comes from surveys. Cohort retention is how, at your entry point, are you retaining students 2 years past that over time? Chronic absence, suspensions, and effective academic program for students with disabilities. All of these are considered in this particular section of the rubric. And oh, it's me still. No, it's you. Sorry.
Back on. So in looking at the school effectiveness review, again, this is a qualitative data collection method where we're actually conducting site visits. The key thing here is that we did make some adjustments. One of the most notable one is that we are now including unannounced classroom observations as a part of the way that the site visit is conducted. You'll see listed here that there are the 4 different measures that we look at that are used in the renewal rubric. We also now, for the site visit itself, we've extended it slightly to make it a 2.5-day site visit so that it gives us additional time to collect the evidence and have the necessary conversations with the various stakeholder groups for an individual school. The next component is around the school climate, and this is really looking at survey data. And so I think most folks are aware that under the Every Student Succeeds Act and the way that Maryland has developed its accountability framework, there will be a new statewide survey being implemented this year as a part of a field test towards collecting survey data for students and staff. And as a result of that, that creates some challenges for us around having data that we would feel comfortable using in this type of an operator renewal process. So basically, because it is a field test year, we've decided that we would then use the student and staff survey results from a 5-year average to being over a 4-year average, so that we're using the data that we have from the survey that we have collected versus commingling it with the new survey that we don't have much experience with or have any real sense of what the data will tell us at this point. As it relates to the parent component, however, the district is continuing the implementation of that survey. So we will have the 5 years worth of data in order to take a look at the experience over time through the parent feedback.
Okay. And so because highly effective instruction, we're proposing that it moves back into the climate section. It means we have to reweight this section. And so, again, option 1 is under the MSA, the original developed framework. So that's what that reflects. Greater weight is given to the components that come from the school effectiveness review. Then other sections, parent, teacher, and student surveys has 3 different data points at that time. It had higher weight than the other categories. Option 2 would keep the higher weight at the school effectiveness review, but equalize the weight for the other areas. A key difference between the school effectiveness review and the other areas that we're looking at as part of this process is that 2.5-day site visit is data intensive. So it's a big process that includes focus groups with every kind of stakeholder group in the school. So students of various grades, parents of children of various grades, teachers of various grades and subjects, the leadership team, the operating board, visits to the classrooms, to 60% of the classrooms, across content areas and across grade levels within a school, collection of anything from lesson plans to meeting minutes to evaluation. And so all of that data is considered. There's an appeal process as part of that. Schools have the opportunity to submit information if they think there are factual errors. They also have the opportunity to submit their own statement and their own feeling about the review that becomes part of the final report. So there's a lot in there. So the consideration for giving that more weight is because of the intensity of that kind of process. Option 3 would consider everything in this area the same weight. From the operators, I don't feel like we've got a strong feedback here. It's a little bit less, but again, more of a tendency towards option 2 than the other categories. And again, because people have a lot of faith in the site visit and recognize the complexity of it, and that it should have more weight than the other areas. So what's your feelings?
I mean, my quick, the one thing I really like, or you maybe could just, the parent and teacher surveys, that you're actually hearing from students on how they're feeling like the climate is. And so the option 1 is 20%, which is quite a bit higher than the option 2 one's 10%. So I personally, everything else is, anyway, I veer towards option 1 on that. Or maybe could be adjusted slightly to accommodate more student voice. That's my only piece of feedback.
Not hearing the other. I'm just being cognizant of the clock. So we really need to, we have an agenda that we obviously aren't going to meet, but we do need to finish this one, and we have to do the procurement because I know that's coming to the board. So if we can sort of go through the last pieces a little bit quicker.
Yep, and we're almost done. But this is our opportunity to get feedback from you before we finalize the rubric. So we need guidance. Okay. Did anybody else have a feeling around the options?
Not so much the weights. I do agree with the student voice.
And I do want to remind
So-
you guys that student focus groups are also part of the SER,
Part of that
just so you have
other
that.
piece. Mhm. Okay.
We're proposing to make 2 very similar changes in the chronic absence and in the suspension slide that follows. So the key again is the bolded, there are no subtractions to the changes in the language in the rubric. So if you want to understand what it said before, if you ignore the bolding, you see it says only additions. So the first is we're emphasizing the importance of strong processes that identify root causes that get at chronic absence. You'll see similar language in the suspension slide. It's something that we've emphasized in the process in terms of the application itself and the guidance that we give schools and when we orient schools around this process, but we still find variability in how much evidence schools actually provide when they write their application. So we thought emphasizing in the rubric would help illustrate the importance of that part of the evidence that schools provide as part of this process. The second change is in highly effective adding giving credit for schools who make significant reductions. Like if you cut your chronic absence rate in half, 50%, that would seem reasonable to be highly effective. Or before the language just said you kept it low. So we wanted to make sure the rubric give credit for reductions as well. So those are kind of the 2 key changes. One thing to note is the definition around chronic absence changed this school year. And so the state moved towards using the federal definition, and so that's what you see reflected here. And so it's something that we would move to align next year because it changes how we look at we're looking over time, and it's qualitative. We wanted to make sure there was a consistency in the definition, so we'll look at using that definition moving forward. And so you see that similar changes in suspensions. And I don't know if there's any.
They make sense. Thank you.
Okay, and then the last change we want to make is to, in the financial management and governance section, to operator capacity. Again, this is the same as in the other changes of the rubric where there are no subtractions, only additions. And the key thing that we wanted to make sure that emphasize that we're also looking at is whether a school has been able to meet its financial obligations or has needed loans or advances from the district to meet those obligations. So it's just a key area of concern that we've seen as an increased need to look at that over time, and so we wanted to make sure it was reflected in the rubric. Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
Can we go to 17 again? Were you asking us for guidance on which option to choose?
Yes.
Okay, so did we choose one?
Well, we give them feedback.
We give-
Your chance to give feedback. I said I prefer option one.
So is there a way to, highly effective instruction and talented people, how closely are they related?
So I don't know if you want to take this question.
I'm not sure what you mean in terms of.
So
related.
talented people, does it go into the folks that are providing highly effective instruction? Is that more broad, highly effective instruction? Am I not understanding?
Yeah, so for the SER protocol itself, there's different data collection methods for different components. So if the highly effective instruction is actually taken from the classroom visits, whereas talented people in part is also from looking at the documentation as well as doing the stakeholder interviews.
Okay.
Yeah, and talented people is looking at training, the professional development that's provided to staff. So it's getting more at those kind of pieces, the staff themselves, where highly effective instruction is looking at the instructional pieces more. So that's the difference between the two.
Thank you. Folks, we have a bit of a problem. Sometimes we don't have enough on the agenda. Apparently today, we really packed the agenda. And even though we gave an hour for the first part around the language arts, the curriculum, we really needed to take a little more. So I know we need to do the procurement, so we're going to do that one. I really need to apologize to those staff who I know were prepared to give us the two other reports around the mid-year performance and the career and technology. We're going to look to see if we can do some adjustments to get them so that we will get those reports publicly. I know we have the written, and they're available to see. But we do need to do the procurement today because that needs to go, our input needs to go to the full board, so.
Good afternoon, members of the board.
Afternoon.
The first procurement item for consideration today is to pay the membership dues to belong to the Council of Great City Schools for the upcoming fiscal year. The cost of the contract is $44,280 for the year.
Any questions?
I was going to move that we.
Well, if we don't have questions, we'll just say as a team that we say, okay.
The next contract is an amendment to reduce the amount of the community schools contract by $765,107. The contract reflects a reduction in the number of partners as well as contributions by other partners to offset some of the costs associated with these agreements.
So can we, when I read this, I mean, okay, we're saving money, there's less, but at the same time, I got a little concerned. I mean, this is really important around community schools and that they're, and so I didn't know how to interpret this. Is it a de-investment or are we saving money? Could you just speak to that a bit more?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Shana McIver. I'm the Family
Hi.
Engagement Manager from the Engagement Office. I'm joining Mr. Parker to give an explanation because I wanted to ensure everyone knew it was not a de-investment in services. In many cases with the community school partnership, the partner and the school leader collaboratively work together to secure other funding sources. So in the spring, when the match amount is determined, throughout the summer, they find other grants, other opportunities. In very few cases is there a case where there are less students served in out-of-school time. So that is the response, that they're collaboratively securing funds through other sources.
Okay. So that's great. Now, that means the school saves money, right? For the most part here, have we saved money? I couldn't tie the money back.
No. So there has not been a change in the amount that the engagement office contributes to the partnership between the Family League of Baltimore City for their management
Right.
oversight. No, there isn't a reduction.
So where does this, the results in an overall decrease of $765,000. So it's basically schools are spending less of their money.
Yes.
And so they have savings that they're moving around their dollars, that they have flexibility over.
Exactly. And in some, very few cases, it was just a case of unique situations where there's a new leader who inherits the strategy and may come in, where there was an increase, rather.
Yeah.
And may come in and they want to provide more, say, out-of-school time supports to more students of some sort. But this is a process that we in Engagement Office recognizes that needs some work, and we would love to tighten it up more, and that's why we're excited that we are hiring a community school specialist, a staff person to be solely responsible in supporting schools and working with partners around determining early on the amount and sticking to it as best possible. But when
Right.
where there's an opportunity to secure more funding or external funding,
But
That's a great
so I'm hearing you, but I'm not totally, so some of these schools, like Pender Hughes has $137,000 less from Humanum. They thought they were going to use Humanum. They're not using them. You're telling me that they raised $137,000 extra from alternate sources, or Village
No.
Learning Place $90,000 decrease?
no, so let me be clear. There are the exceptions where, let me explain the process.
Yeah.
So in the spring of each school year, the Family League facilitates a process, an end of the year process where partners and principals determine if they want to continue the partnership and look at the successes and areas to polish and so forth. At the close of that meeting, they determine, okay, is the school able to contribute the match amount? And normally, that does not change. For whatever reason, after the budget is done or there have been any changes in the budget, there may be a need to change the amount. And sometimes the partner can leverage other dollars to cushion the cost for schools. But there is a huge amount of amendments that happen each year. And so that's what I mean by we are excited to, looking forward to someone to come on to kind of hold the hands and support the schools around the procurement process a little bit better. But in most cases, it is simply that they find the funding other places. But again, there are unique situations where they
Right.
change and say, well, I don't have the amount of
I guess when I
money
read
had
this, I was
originally.
kind of like, are people like closing down community schools? Are
No.
are we reducing the total number because we're really?
No, that
excited
is
about-
not the
Okay.
case. There have not been any removed. In the case, one school, Lakeland, there was an issue with the partner, and so the services were provided by the Family League of Baltimore City. There wasn't even a break in their community school services, but they determined that they wanted to dissolve the partnership with their community-based organization.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
The next contract, 9.03, is to pay the membership dues to belong to Maryland Association of Board of Education. The contract amount is $41,089.
Any questions? Okay,
The next contract is the Springboard. The amount is $375,000. This is to provide an intensive 5-week summer program to assist 600 students.
So, yeah, I have questions on this one. So, is this the College Board Springboard, same College Board? Isn't there a Springboard
No.
curriculum?
Yes.
But this is not,
And no, that's right.
okay,
Yeah, this is Springboard Collaborative.
okay.
Which is
For Title
different
I.
than Springboard, what we use for college prep and GAL and all of that.
Got
Different.
you. Okay, because I've got an earful about that.
Yeah.
Springboard, other curriculum, and I didn't know that we were doing this, and I wasn't believing the results. And so so we're contributing, priority schools, 250 in Title I, 125, so we're essentially funding this. The schools aren't paying for this.
Correct.
And these are the 100% schools, or is it all?
It's the priority
Yeah.
subset, so the 100% project schools are all SIG 4.
Okay.
These are our priority schools, so there is a subset of them that needed summer learning opportunities, and so we pulled them together in a cohort for this particular program. Something that I do want to note, and why we have that braided funding between the Title I priority versus general Title I, is that part of this is targeting our Cherry Hill community, where we know several of those schools will be splitting up a bit and bringing those students together. And this summer program offers a great opportunity for the parents and the teachers to engage in that work together. So we thought it was a real added benefit for the community, but there's 2 schools that aren't technically priority, they're just Title I. So we're
Gotcha.
leveraging those funds together to ensure we can bring that to that community.
And it says, I wasn't, so you know the schools? Like it
Correct.
says number of students, but I don't see the schools, or did I miss it?
Oh, correct, the schools may not be listed, I can certainly give you a list of all of them. I mean, it's
The 600 school, like just how many schools? I'd like
Yeah.
to see the list, but how many?
no problem.
Is it like
So-
5, 10, 20?
Yeah, yeah, so it's across, I believe, 5 schools.
Okay.
In Cherry Hill, it's a combination of those who are leaving Carter G and who are going into the Cherry Hill School, as well as Arundel. They will be hosted at the New Era site. There's also Hazelwood, the historic Samuel Coleridge Taylor, and Harlem Park, whose students will be going to the historic Samuel Coleridge Taylor because Harlem Park's building is not fit for summer school. So it's across
Thank
those
you.
5 sites, sure.
Okay.
Chief Conley, so will whatever curriculum potentially adopted, will it be introduced during this period of time?
I'm not so sure the timing would be appropriate at that. What this was about is more around, we had an area, a group of kids that we wanted to make sure that we provided some sort of summer learning opportunity to. But I believe the timing for this will be, the first week of July?
It's our traditional summer
Yeah.
school timing, so right after the 4th of July through the beginning of August, that sort of 5-week range.
Okay.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you. The next contract is with Legacy Partners International. The contract amount is $450,000. The contract term is from May 23rd, 2018 through June 30th of 2021. The contract includes approximately 25 schools and provides school-wide seat licenses for all students, as well as professional development and some online courses. Request the board's approval.
Okay, I see we have a question.
So this is mostly done by school budgets, but there's a small amount from district Title I funds. I guess this is always, like, how do we pick this one? How is it aligned to the blueprint? It does seem like a one-off. There's a lot of differentiated seat licenses that we could choose. Why this one? And I always worry that we do this for like 3 years or so, but I just want to know alignment to blueprint essentially, because it's mostly coming out of school budgets.
Sure. So this material has been identified by the Gifted and Advanced Learning team specifically to be used by schools that are doing that programming, but the product is actually suitable for the entire school community. So schools have voiced that they're interested in it because it's not just a program that would be used with a subset of their students, but it's really appropriate for a whole school strategy. So that is in part how it was identified. It's truly an enrichment material, so it helps identify, it's adaptive, and then it helps students kind of identify interests, particularly in the younger elementary grades. We've identified some Title I funds that we're using to provide it for some schools, but a number of schools specifically expressed during the FY19 budget process that they wish to be able to purchase this product as part of their own strategy for being able to differentiate for all students, which is part of the reason why the limit request is above and beyond what just the district Title I allocation is.
So this is really for differentiation of kids to kind of push them further, is
Yeah.
it essentially?
Yeah, so it's adaptive, so it's sort
Yeah.
of a twofold piece in that it will identify areas of growth needed academically, but then it's also a tool to help students kind of identify interest areas and sort of be able to help teachers tailor projects and things like that to students' specific needs and interests.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Do we have one last item?
Mm-hmm.
I want to just repeat the name. Can you just repeat the name, Mr. Parker?
Sure.
Renzel.
The name is Legacy Partners International.
Legacy Partners International?
Right,
I thought it was Renzeli.
yes, it is.
Oh, Renzeli Learning.
Uh-huh,
Renzuli Learning.
Renzulli Learning.
legacy,
But the company's name, yeah.
Legacy Partners.
okay.
LPI Learning, might be under LPI Learning.
You say.
And then we have one last
Gotcha.
procurement pertaining to young audiences.
Mm-hmm.
Apologize to the board for its lateness. This is a contract request to increase the current contract with young audiences by $1.4 million. So in other words, we're going to increase the contract from 1.2 to $2.6 million on an annual basis. Young Audiences is primarily responsible for the Summer Arts and Learning Academy that we provide. That program has grown over the years substantially, which is justifying the increase in the cost of the contract.
Questions?
Yes, I appreciate the work that Young Audiences does for city schools, but I'm just, and I know it has to go before the board, but I'm concerned, is there a way that we can use some of this money to leverage our fine arts program that we already have internally versus contracting to supplement with Young Audiences?
Can you clarify what you mean by that? I just want to make sure I
So
understand the question.
we're renewing a contract for all of what Young Audiences does in our school system, right?
This is just mainly summer.
That's correct, and
This
they-
isn't just for the summer, or is it just for all of what they do? This is
So
just for the
it's-
summer?
It's for their whole portfolio of work, but the vast majority of the financial impact for us is their summer learning programming. So they do a couple of different things. They provide summer learning programming, for which this year, the cost of that is $2.5 million, all of which is part of our Title I plan. In addition to that, they provide fine arts programming during the school year, and there's a couple of different ways that they do that. So they do assembly-type services, so it could be kind of like a one-off where they'll go into a school and provide an arts-focused assembly for
I understand.
students. And then they'll do like artist-in-residence programs where they're pairing an actual teaching artist with a city schools teacher or a team of teachers to basically support arts enrichment in the school.
So for me, this is just a really big jump. I knew we were planning it, but I didn't know we were planning it this level. And so I'm gonna I haven't had a chance to review it, so I'll review it closely and then send any questions via email.
Sure, and if it's okay, just to refresh folks' memories on our summer learning plan. So we're providing the same level of service for our elementary Title I students this year. So we're providing summer learning programming for about 2,100 students in grades K through 5. The difference here is this year, the sole provider of that program is going to be Young Audiences. In prior years, we split those services across 2 different vendors, and that's why you see the contract increase request for Young Audiences. That's correct.
Right. And if I remember the evaluation, the attendance and things for young audiences was much more positive. So-
That's what informed our
And the
decision.
growth,
And the
right.
growth, yeah. No, I know, I just haven't read it. It's a big number.
So, all right. Thank you. If I can indulge for 1 3-minute period, Melissa Rudo also signed up. Is she still here?
I'm right here. I probably only going to take 3 minutes. I just wanted to introduce myself.
You gotta push the button.
Push the green button. On the mic,
There you
yes,
go. There you go.
okay.
Now it's green. Hi, I'm Melissa Rudo. I am a parent in Baltimore City of 10-year-old twins, but I also work in education. And I wanted to come here because I've always worked in STEM, but in higher education throughout Maryland, D.C., Northern Virginia, and now I'm in K through 12. So this is new to me, so bear with me if I sound a little ignorant. But I did notice a few things that just were major outliers, and I wanted to bring it to your attention. The definition of student effectiveness and how you do it, and making sure that whatever vendor you choose, even though I am technically one, I don't care. I mean, I just started literally this month. But they can do the training for you. You should not be charged for that. You require that and demand them to do it, because I did it. That's number one. Number two, so how do you motivate and get everybody involved? And when you're looking at these programs, there are equipment, and again, I can only speak to STEM. I can't speak to arts and learning. But they can be, you can use the same equipment, and there are different levels, and you can have different levels in the same classroom, and they're learning the same concept. So maybe it's velocity or kinetics, and then the project's just different amongst the groups. And so that is very effective in making sure that your students have comprehension. And as well, they do adaptive learning by, the book is not as important anymore. Let me tell you something. Your college students aren't buying books, number one. Number two, that's almost like a supplement. The way you learn is comprehension from teaching each other. And you can see it at the community level and at the college level. And I can also tell you the withdrawal, drop, and failure rate when you move and transition from a community college to a four-year school like Towson or Maryland is 80 to 85%. And I have that on record. So we have to start early, and we have to start at pre-K and K. And if there's anything I can do, let me know, because number one, I'm a parent, and I live in the city, and I care, and I happen to be in the business, and I'm done.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
If you have some information, we'll be sure to share it with our PCAB group, and also any other our parent involvement
do
folks.
so.
But thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
I want to thank everyone who was here today, especially staff. Again, I'm apologizing for having to shortchange some of you in terms of presentations. I think for our first time, we're, as we said, we are piloting this. There are some upcoming meetings that I'm supposed to be sharing with you. We're going to look forward to the dates for the presentation around the language arts curriculum. I know they're going to be posted, so please look forward to those. There are also some written updates that are online on our website if folks want to see more of what we received for this meeting. The 21st Century Academic Summary Report is a written update. The 2017 National Assessment of Educational Progress, and the third quarter special education reports. Those were all to be written updates. Our next meeting for this committee will be on June the 5th, 3:30. We'll make sure our agenda is a little better. So right now, we know we're going to be talking about the middle and high school choice process, the results of that, the charter school compliance report, and we're going to be looking at the blueprint again, this time with focus around student wholeness update. So again, thank you for being here, and if anybody is still around, there is a board forum on the budget at 6 p.m. in this same room. See you then. Thank you.